They're battling each other. You gotta look back at it when time passes and you look and you say, you said things that agitated each other to the point that you might have wanted to run into each other.
50 Cent just dropped new evidence about Tupac and Biggie's murders, and the entire story we thought we understood is suddenly upside down. His Netflix series breaks open gang alliances, hidden industry pressure, unheard police recordings from Keefe D, and testimonies from insiders who now claim the East-West rivalry was never just a rap beef. It was a bigger proxy struggle with real money in the shadows. Once those buried recordings hit the light, the murders stop looking like random drive-bys and start looking like a coordinated setup that someone wanted hidden for decades. And here's the wild part. After almost 30 years of silence, confusion, dead ends, and people fighting online over theories, one of hip-hop's most fearless voices has stepped up to pull back the curtain. Curtis 50 Cent Jackson came through on December 2nd, 2025 with a Netflix docuseries that shook the entire industry, taking a hard look at the killings of Tupac Shakur and the Notorious B.I.G., two legends whose deaths shaped the entire culture. It's been 28 years since Christopher Wallace, Biggie, was murdered in Los Angeles on March 9, 1997, and just 6 months before that, on September 13, 1996, Tupac Shakur died after being shot in a Vegas drive-by. They weren't just rappers, they were cultural forces, voices for millions, artists whose influence still pulls weight today. For literally decades, fans everywhere have been trying to figure out what really happened. Theories ran wild in comment sections, Reddit threads, group chats, everybody arguing about shooters, motives, gang ties, and whether someone in the industry was pulling strings behind the scenes. But until now, nobody had enough pieces of the puzzle to say anything with full confidence. That's where 50 Cent comes in, a guy who has never backed away from controversial stories or difficult truths. His Netflix series gathers industry insiders, unreleased archival material, and police recordings that were locked away for years, piecing together a version of events that feels way more intentional than the surface-level stories we were fed. This isn't just another documentary repeating the same details. This one brings in people who actually lived through it. People who were in studios, in meetings, in the industry buildings watching everything escalate. And now, after decades, they're finally ready to talk, and their stories paint a chilling picture of how deep the chaos ran. Episode 2 dives straight into the murders and introduces testimonies from Craig Mack's ex-wife Roxanne Johnson, label co-founder Kirk Burroughs, and rapper Mark Curry from Bad Boy. These weren't outsiders. These were people inside the machine, watching the pressure rise and the fear spread as the beef went from lyrics to literal warfare. One of the biggest reveals is how the East-West rivalry allegedly turned into a shadow conflict involving street gangs. The doc explains that certain Crip groups aligned with East Coast interests, while some blood sets aligned with West Coast power players, turning a rap feud into a dangerous street proxy battle. This wasn't magazine trash talk. This was real violence with real alliances and real consequences. Kirk Burroughs makes one of the heaviest points in the whole series. He says that looking back with mature eyes, it becomes clear that Tupac's murder wasn't just chaotic, it looked orchestrated. According to him, after Tupac was shot in Las Vegas, the industry didn't slow down. It sped up. Business came first, safety came second, and Biggie was pushed to fly to Los Angeles to promote Life After Death, even though everyone knew the tension was at an all-time high.
Well, I got the Life After Death double CD dropping March 25th.
Biggie himself reportedly didn't want to go. He knew it wasn't safe, he felt the danger in the air, but the industry pressure was louder than his instincts. And Burroughs says straight up that it felt like Biggie was being guided into a situation that never should have happened. But here's where things shift from theory to something more concrete. The doc doesn't just use opinions, it rolls out what it frames as hard evidence. Audio recordings from Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, a Southside Crip member who was arrested in 2023 for Tupac's murder and is now awaiting trial. These recordings came from a 2008 proffer session, basically a protected interview where the police allow you to talk freely for limited immunity. And in them, Keefe D describes the night Tupac was shot with chilling detail. He explains exactly where they were, who was in the car, who passed the weapon, and how it all spiraled after the MGM Grand fight earlier that night. In the audio, Keefe describes how Tupac and members of Death Row beat up Orlando Anderson inside the casino after spotting him due to an earlier robbery incident. That moment flipped everything. And according to Keefe, The retaliation started immediately. He says their crew armed themselves and went searching for Tupac afterward, first waiting outside Club 662, where Tupac was supposed to perform. They sat there for around 90 minutes with weapons ready, but Tupac never arrived, so they left to regroup. And that's when fate stepped in. When they left the club's parking lot and went toward a liquor store, they suddenly spotted Tupac's BMW at a stoplight.
No. You're back at your own hotel.
We're at the Luxor.
The timing was brutal. The intersection was chaotic, and according to Keith, everything that followed was set in motion in seconds. These recordings, now part of his official murder case, line up with multiple puzzle pieces that never fit before. And that's exactly why 50 Cent's documentary has people saying the murders finally look connected, planned, and part of a much bigger structure than we were ever told. They spotted Tupac's black BMW rolling through the intersection, and witnesses say he was leaning slightly out of the passenger window with that same larger-than-life energy he always carried, full of charisma, even in the middle of a Vegas night. Davis says their crew made a sharp U-turn and pulled up alongside Pac's vehicle at East Flamingo Road and Covell Lane, lining themselves up for the moment that changed music history forever. And here's where the details get heavy. Davis claims he reached forward from the passenger seat, pulled out a .40 caliber Glock, and handed it toward the back seat. According to what he says in his recorded statement, Orlando Anderson reached out and told him, "Give it here, I'll shoot," before allegedly firing multiple rounds at Tupac's car.
That's a strong dude, yo. I know Duke, you know what I'm saying?
Very
He's
strong.
real strong. So when it was
Very
like he got shot, I was just more like, again? You know what I'm saying? He always getting shot or shot at. He gonna pull through this one again, make a few records about it, and it's gonna be over, you know what I'm saying? But when he died, I was just like, whoa.
People close to Tupac said he had survived so many altercations before that some genuinely thought he would pull through again. One person said it felt like he always gets shot or shot at, he's going to make a few records about it and move on. But when the news broke that Pac didn't survive, reality hit like a punch to the chest. Tupac was struck 4 times, twice in the chest, with 1 round piercing his lung, once in the arm, and once in the thigh. Suge Knight, driving the BMW, was grazed in the head by a bullet fragment, but managed to keep the car moving for several blocks before coming to a stop. And 6 days later, on September 13th, 1996, Tupac Shakur was gone, a voice silenced, a revolution cut short, and a culture changed forever. Davis also claims in his proffer interview that this wasn't just a revenge hit. He says there was a bounty involved, money allegedly offered for taking out both Tupac and Suge Knight. He claims only half the payment was delivered because Suge survived, raising the chilling question, who would sponsor something this extreme and what deeper motive sat behind it? The documentary leans hard into the idea that this wasn't random, wasn't sloppy, and wasn't spur-of-the-moment street chaos. It paints it as something calculated, something planned, and part of a larger wave of escalating danger fueled by industry rivalries, territorial tension, egos, and the money engines surrounding hip-hop at the time. According to the insiders in the series, what started as music competition slowly turned into a real-world battlefield where every move carried weight, where crews were ready for retaliation, and where bad decisions could mean life or end. The outcome was irreversible, and the damage stretched far beyond the charts. Rewinding to that night in Vegas makes everything even clearer. September 7th, 1996 began as a night of excitement. Mike Tyson was fighting Bruce Seldon at the MGM Grand, and that level of energy always pulled celebrities, athletes, and anybody who wanted to be seen at the center of the spotlight. Tupac rolled in with Suge Knight and members of the Outlaws, a tight circle of people who moved like family. The fight ended fast. Tyson knocked Seldon out in just 109 seconds, and the arena buzz spilled into the casino. But in the middle of that crowd, destiny collided with danger when Trevon Lane, affiliated with the mob Piru, pointed out Orlando Anderson standing nearby. This wasn't random. Earlier that year, Anderson had allegedly participated in robbing Lane of a death row chain at a Foot Locker in Lakewood. That robbery had sparked serious tension between Crip and blood-aligned circles around the industry, and seeing Anderson standing there in the casino lobby was the match dropped onto a gasoline trail. Tupac reacted instantly. The MGM surveillance footage shows him throwing the first punch, knocking Anderson down. Suge and others jumped in, and for a tense moment, Anderson was overwhelmed on the casino floor before security finally pulled everyone apart.
Directly behind you.
Yeah. Because Frank was driving.
But anyone who understands street politics knows that public humiliation doesn't just disappear. It demands an answer. That wasn't a small fight. That was a statement. And on the streets, statements spark movement. The documentary makes it clear just how fast the retaliation gears were turning. Not days later, not weeks later, but hours later. Davis's accounts across interviews, his memoir, and the 2008 police proffer all line up on this point. Their crew mobilized that same night with the intention to respond before the sun came up. According to him, it wasn't up for debate. It was, our guy got jumped tonight. We handled this tonight. Idi Amin from the Outlaws, who was actually there and driving behind Tupac's BMW, has shared emotional details over the years about how chaotic and heartbreaking those final moments were. He described seeing the flash of gunfire, the sudden panic, and the realization that the night had turned into something irreversible. He describes the atmosphere that night with a kind of painful clarity, almost like he's replaying a memory he wishes he could freeze in place. The energy was high, the mood was loose, and everything felt like just another night in the whirlwind life they were living. Young, talented, successful, and moving like nothing could touch them. They were heading to Club 662, where Tupac was scheduled to perform, ready to extend the celebration into the early morning hours. But mixed in with that excitement were warning signs that, looking back now, feel impossible to ignore. Idi Amin remembers how Yaki Gaddafi, another outlaw member who would tragically be killed 2 months later in a separate incident.
What went through your head when you saw that?
They shoot my. That's, you know what I mean? They shoot, that's what we saying. Like, yo, they shooting the car. They shoot, you know, we telling Frank, like, yo, what the you know what I mean? It's going down.
Leaned forward and quietly asked their security guard, Frank Alexander, a question that carried real weight. You got your gun, right? Gaddafi wasn't being dramatic. He sensed the tension in the air, sensed the danger brewing beneath the surface. When Frank admitted that he didn't have it on him, explaining that Las Vegas police had already warned everyone that anyone caught with a weapon would be arrested on the spot, Gaddafi's reaction shifted instantly. According to the retellings, he became anxious, even frustrated, because he understood how exposed they were in that moment, moving through the city without proper protection at the height of a coast-wide conflict. Idi says the realization hit all of them at once when the shots erupted. The shock, the confusion, the instinctive yell of, "They're shooting the car," as bullets punched through metal and glass. He says the chaos happened so fast that nobody even had time to process it. All they could do was shout directions to Frank, brace themselves, and pray they could get out alive. And that's one of the harshest truths of that night. The biggest rapper in the world, a man who had become a global symbol, was riding through Las Vegas with no real security, no armed protection, nothing except the hope that the night would stay calm. Every single decision that led to that moment, the warnings from police, the attempt to avoid legal trouble, the split-second judgment calls, might have seemed reasonable on their own. But together, they created a fatal chain of vulnerability. Meanwhile, according to Davis's account, his crew was moving with intent from the moment they learned what happened at the MGM. They armed themselves with that .40 caliber Glock, the same weapon later identified as the murder weapon, and positioned themselves at Club 662, waiting in the parking lot for Tupac to arrive. But after nearly 90 minutes with no sign of him, they decided to leave for a liquor store. And that detour is where everything collided. As they drove, they spotted Tupac's black BMW, with Pac visible from the passenger seat, full of life, animated, and unmistakably himself. Davis describes the next moments with chilling precision. The white Cadillac making a hard U-turn, lining up beside Tupac's vehicle, the gun being passed to the back seat, and the sudden eruption of gunfire that tore across the Las Vegas night. Idi Amin, watching from the trailing vehicle, remembers seeing an arm extend from the back of the Cadillac, the muzzle flashes lighting up the intersection, and the horrifying realization that they were watching an ambush unfold in real time. Their car had no weapons inside, no way to retaliate, and no way to shield Tupac from the barrage. The BMW, now riddled with bullets, swerved violently before finally coming to a stop. Despite being grazed himself, Suge Knight managed to attempt driving Tupac toward help before police and paramedics arrived. Tupac was rushed into emergency surgery at University Medical Center, where doctors worked tirelessly to save him, repairing lung damage, addressing internal bleeding, and fighting against the catastrophic injuries he sustained. For 6 long days, the world waited. Fans praying, family grieving, the industry frozen in disbelief. hoping Tupac would once again survive something he wasn't supposed to survive. But the injuries were beyond repair. On September 13, 1996, at 4:03 p.m., Tupac Amaru Shakur was pronounced dead at just 25 years old. His death left a void so deep that hip-hop still feels it today, a voice silenced at the height of its power, a revolutionary cut down before his message could reach its full force. And for many, the heartbreak carried a second emotion beneath it: fear. Because if someone as famous, visible, and protected as Tupac could be taken out in such a public way, then nobody in the industry was truly safe. And the violence did not end there. The documentary argues that Biggie's murder 6 months later was not a coincidence, not random, but the next tragic chapter in a cycle that had spun far out of control. On March 9, 1997, Biggie was in Los Angeles for the Soul Train Music Awards after-party. Despite repeated warnings, despite the tension between the coasts, despite everything that had happened to Tupac. But promotional pressure for life after death pushed him into a city many believed was still hostile ground. That night, as Biggie left the Peterson Automotive Museum and climbed into his GMC Suburban, a dark-colored Chevrolet Impala rolled up beside him. A shooter, whose identity remains officially unconfirmed to this day, fired multiple rounds into the vehicle. Biggie was struck 4 times, with the fatal shot piercing his heart and organs. He was pronounced dead at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center at just 24 years old. The documentary even shows newly released grainy footage from the aftermath. Police lights flashing, crowds scattering, the sound of panic, and the unmistakable devastation of losing yet another young black icon within months of the first. The series includes archival clips of Valletta Wallace, Biggie's mother, speaking through grief as she expresses her belief that her son's death was a consequence of the larger power struggles and rivalries tearing the industry apart. What the documentary argues, and what multiple testimonies strongly suggest, is that these weren't random acts of violence. They were orchestrated hits, pieces of a larger pattern of retaliation and proxy warfare. And the people involved weren't just street-level participants, but potentially individuals with financial resources, industry access, and motives that extended far beyond the block. The series doesn't claim to solve the murders outright, but it lays out a narrative so detailed that it becomes difficult to view either death as an isolated moment in gang history. Now, we reach the part that frustrates anyone who has followed these cases for decades: the unresolved mystery. Because even with all the confessions, testimonies, books, documentaries, police files, and interviews, Biggie's murder remains officially unsolved, and Tupac's case only reached its first arrest in 2023, nearly 27 years after he was shot. Think about that for a moment. 2 of the most high-profile murders in American entertainment history, 2 global icons whose deaths made international headlines, yet no one was held accountable for decades. How does that happen? What does it say about the justice system? What does it say about the investigative process? And what does it reveal about the obstructions and failures that shape both cases from day one? The documentary goes deep into those investigative challenges. In Tupac's case, Las Vegas police hit immediate roadblocks. Witnesses from his entourage were reluctant to cooperate due to the street code, fears of retaliation, and the cultural expectation that you don't talk to police. On top of that, the M incident wasn't immediately connected to the murder. Witness descriptions of the getaway vehicle weren't pursued aggressively, and individuals like Yaki Gaddafi, who had first-hand information, were killed before they could testify fully. Biggie's case became even more tangled due to the LAPD Rampart scandal. Corruption, internal conflicts, and allegations of officers tied to death row records created an investigative environment where trust collapsed. Retired Detective Russell Poole spent years arguing that corrupt officers might have been involved, while later Detective Greg Kading presented a completely different theory implicating Wardell Poochie Faust as the alleged shooter hired by intermediaries. But Faust was killed in 2003, taking whatever knowledge he had with him. The documentary doesn't shy away from the public speculation either. Over the years, online discussions have repeatedly mentioned figures like Sean Diddy Combs based on comments made by Keefe D in interviews. But PAC's investigators have stated clearly that Diddy is not a suspect. He has consistently denied involvement, and no law enforcement agency has presented evidence tying him to either murder. This is where public opinion splits, with some praising 50 Cent for digging up testimonies and shining light on cases that many felt had been ignored, while others accused the series of sensationalism. Biggie's estate even called certain claims pathological lies, pointing out inaccuracies and omissions. And critics argue the documentary gives limited attention to other players, such as Jimmy Henchman and the 1994 Quad Studios robbery, which some believe were crucial parts of the bigger picture. Netflix's official stance is that the series is a compilation of available testimonies, evidence, recordings, and public claims meant to spark discussion and revisit cases that shaped hip-hop history. Even they acknowledge that much of the material remains testimonial and that viewers should approach the series with critical thinking. And now comes the hard truth. Even with Keith D's arrest, even with audio tapes, police reports, interviews, and decades of research, there is still no guarantee of closure. His trial has been pushed to February 2026, delayed repeatedly due to new evidence, legal complications, and witness issues. He has pleaded not guilty and now claims many of his past statements were exaggerated for attention or book deals. Biggie's case has even less hope. Every major suspect is dead, every promising lead has evaporated, and the official investigation sits stagnant. Wrongful death lawsuits filed by his family argued for LAPD involvement and cover-ups, but nothing definitive emerged. Too much time has passed, too many witnesses are gone, and too many documents are incomplete. So what do we take away from all this? The documentary argues that both murders expose massive systemic failures. Failures in law enforcement, failures in the industry, failures in security decisions, and failures in how young black men were protected within a volatile mix of fame, rivalry, and profit. Tupac riding through Vegas without proper protection, Biggie pressured to travel to Los Angeles despite clear danger. These weren't isolated missteps, but signs of a system that prioritized business over safety. The unsolved nature of these cases also speaks to deeper issues about how violence in black communities is treated, about whose lives are pursued with urgency, and about what happens when money, power, and rivalry blend into a combustible cycle. And ultimately, these stories reveal the destructive power of unchecked ego, competition, and the myth that artists had to carry street conflicts into real life. The East Coast-West Coast feud wasn't just entertainment. It had real consequences, real casualties, and a legacy of grief that still haunts hip-hop. As we wait for Keith D's 2026 trial, hoping for clarity, we're left with the reality that Biggie's case remains cold and may never be solved. Two extraordinary artists were lost to violence that could have been prevented, and the full truth behind their deaths may remain forever out of reach. Their music lives on, but the men themselves are gone, and the weight of unanswered questions remains. If you're still here, drop your thoughts in the comments below and tap subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of this story.